All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming down tonight. We are live from Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, so a note to our internet audience watching at home. If at any time during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of tonight's book, you could just call the number on your screen. We'll take care of that for you. We'll get it signed, and we will ship it to wherever you are in the United States free of charge. So this evening, Books and Books is very happy to welcome Mr. Ben Harrison and his new book, Sailing Down the Mountain. And I have the pleasure of reading a guest introduction. Ben's publisher, Sherrill Rhodes of the New Atlantean Library, could not be with us tonight due to a scheduling conflict. Nonetheless, he sent the words of introduction for our guest, Ben Harrison, tonight. Mr. Rhodes says, like many people who come down to Key West, my introduction to Ben Harrison was through his songs. He used to sing in the clubs, and you can still catch him at an occasional performance or pick up one of his CDs. And when you hear his songs, most of his compositions are originals, you'll recognize that he's quite a storyteller. Later, when he and I wound up sitting next to each other in the same Friday lunch group, I came to realize he's also an entertaining raconteur. You'll hang on to his every word. When I first read his book, Undying Love, a macabre true story of unrequited love and refusal to accept death in Key West, I also discovered he's a very accomplished writer. Around that time, I launched my book publishing company, so when Ben raised the possibility of publishing a new edition of Undying Love, I eagerly agreed. I was honored to help keep this iconic tale in front of readers. We followed that with his novel Charlie Jones, and now Sailing Down the Mountain. When Ben and his wife Helen proposed this autobiographical story about how they built a boat, I was hesitant, advising them that memoirs don't sell unless you're famous. But boy, was I wrong. Sailing Down the Mountain has been extremely well received by readers. Maybe that's because it's more than a simple memoir. Sailing Down the Mountain is a grand tale of adventure. It's funny, it's a romance, it's can't-put-it-down writing that will quickly hook you. Ben Harrison is a damn good writer and a damn good friend. I'm glad that he and Helen shared their story with me and now with you. How many of us would sell everything and skip off to a Central American country where we barely speak the language and take on the task of building a 38-foot sailboat, something we've never done before, and build it on top of a mountain, then sail it through the Panama Canal, then north to a new home in wonky, eccentric Key West. And what's more, this never-been-done-before boat becomes the prototype for the popular Cabo Rico production sailboat. That's something to sing about, or, in this case, to write about. Ladies and gentlemen, sailors and landlubbers, risk-takers and armchair adventurers, please welcome Ben Harrison.
Thank you.
All right.
And thank you very much, Books and Books. This is a real honor to be here in Miami, the big city for us. We're kind of driving with our hearts in our throats. And the reason Helen and I left the relative comfort and security of San Francisco for an undertaking that defied logic is hard to explain, but I think a song I learned long after we sailed into the harbor of Key West sums it up as best as it can be, and I'm going to sing that song for you. It's written by Guy Clark. One of the few songs I do that I didn't write, but if I'd known that I could write songs when he wrote this one, this would have been the song that I wrote. It's time for a change. I'm tired of the same old same old words, same old rhymes, same old tricks, same old lines. Today's a precious day. They roll in and out like waves. I've got boards to build, I've got planks to make, I've got charts to read, I've got seas to sail. I'm gonna build me a boat with these two hands. It'll be a fair curve from a noble plan. Let the chips fall where they will. I've got boats to build. tales are just like wings. The wind makes them sing songs of life, songs of hope, songs to keep our dreams afloat. I'm gonna build me a boat with these two hands. It'll be a fair curve from a noble plan. Let the chips fall where they will. I've got boats to build. I've seen the distant shore. That's where I'm headed for. Got the stars to guide my way, take me to the light of day. I'm gonna build me a boat with these two hands. It'll be a fair curve from a noble plan. Let the chips fall where they will. I've got boats to build. I'm gonna build me a boat with these two hands. It'll be a fair curve from a noble plan. Let the chips fall where they will. I've got boats to build. I've got boats to build. Thank you. Well, Helen and I's relationship, our courtship was a rather stormy one. When Helen and I decided to get married, she went home and said, "Mom and Dad, I need to talk to you. I want to get married." And her mother said, "Oh, to that nice boy Chuck." And she said, "No, do you remember Ben?" And her mother ran upstairs crying, and her father went to the liquor cabinet. And so after a hastily arranged wedding, Helen and I took off to San Francisco, and where we decided we were going to live. We really didn't want to live in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is where Helen's from, or Corpus Christi, Texas. And quite honestly, I think they were glad to just be rid of us at that point in time. Nobody was saying, "Why don't you stay here?" And fatigue, I think, would have been a good word to use as they waved goodbye to Helen and I and our Irish setter Ralph, who was to come with us throughout this entire adventure. You need a big Irish setter to help you out. And so in San Francisco, we'd both gone to school in Dallas, Texas, and the change was incredibly dramatic. Here, in Dallas, Texas, in the 1970s, men with beards just didn't wear makeup or pull their dresses up on Castro Street, and nor did the women hold hands and caress each other in the small shops. Our apartment that we found was between Market and Castro and Haight-Ashbury in the Buena Vista area. So we were in a very interesting place. And Castro was and still is, but it was so invigorating. The temperature was in the 60s, and I'm here. We'd been in Dallas, where it's in the hundreds, and it's very energizing. And our apartment was right across the street from the Buena Vista Park, which means good view. And we could climb this mountain and look and see the entire city of San Francisco and the bay and Alcatraz, and watch the sailboats sail and until the fog came in. But at first we really didn't know what we were going to do out there. I was going to take the bar examination. That was our plan, and then just see what happened after that. And but we didn't have much money, but we really had a good time. We'd take the bus trolley up to the Hyde cable car and take it across to Fisherman's Wharf and get a Dungeness crab and come back and drink jug wine and sourdough bread. And there were a lot of things to do that didn't cost that much money. So I took the bar, and after that, of course, we needed to earn a living. So I'd been a bartender before, and I got a job tending bar at the Cliff House in San Francisco. And it was nothing back then. Everybody now says, "Oh, you were a bartender at the Cliff House," but Irish coffees were 50 cents, and well drinks were 75. So, and at one point in time, I think the most I had working was 200. It was a busy place, and Helen Cocktail there, and it was a different economy back then. Our apartment was $200 a month, and we were bringing home together about $100 a day. So in 1 week, we could really pay our expenses for the entire month, which doesn't happen there now. And it was while we were working at the Cliff House that something very unexpected happened that changed our life. It's sort of fate is the hunter type thing. My dad died and left me a $20,000 life insurance policy. And we'd been going to Sausalito and looking at boats, and we'd been walking the piers. And from Corpus Christi, which is a coastal town, I'd always had these dreams of sailing off into the sunset and eating fresh fish and that sort of thing. But they were just pipe dreams until this point. And so the magazines we had on sailing looked like they'd been in a doctor's office for months. And we bought every book we possibly could on sailing and boat building. And finally, we didn't want to go into debt. That was one of our deals. We just didn't want to borrow money to do this, because that sort of defeats the purpose of freedom. And so finally, after going through all sorts of contortions on what we should do and how we should do this, we bought a boat. We signed a contract to buy a boat from Taiwan called a Seawolf. And what we were going to do, we bought the boat finished on the exterior, but unfinished on the interior. And so we figured, what the heck, we'd finish the interior, and that way we could, slowly go about our business. And when it was finished, then we could sail off and eat fresh fish. Unfortunately, the energy crisis hit at that point in time. And this was during the Carter administration. I mean, cars were lined up for blocks and blocks just to get 5 gallons of gasoline. And it wasn't bad in San Francisco because we had the mass transit, and we could get to work by taking the Divisadero and bus. But the only person it was hard on was our dog Ralph, because he liked to come in the back of the station wagon, and it was cool enough so that he could just stay back there, and then during lunch we could run him on the beach. And the Cliff House is right next to Seal Rock, so there was the barking of the seals, and it was a very picturesque place. And of course, we were saving as much money as we possibly could, because we knew we were going to need this to finish this project. And the problem was that the energy crisis meant that fiberglass resin was going to go up in price dramatically, because it's a petroleum product. And they never shipped the boat, which was devastating to us. We really had our hearts set on it, and all our plans had been made toward that end. Coincidentally, the yacht broker who sold us the Seawolf just happened to be going to Costa Rica to build a 36-foot midship cockpit boat. And it sounded kind of cool. And but I had a big aversion to a midship cockpit design, because in a 36-foot boat, there just really isn't enough room. It's very enticing to have an aft cabin, which is sort of the owner's stateroom. But the problem is the cockpit is right over the widest part of the boat, and the engine occupies the best living quarters. So Helen and I started building an aft cockpit version of this. One of the things that was a great relief, I mean, starting our trip down to Costa Rica, driving down to Costa Rica, was the beginning of a pretty grand adventure itself. We went down to Krelock, was a designer of this boat, and we visited with him one last time before we left the States. And we'd been sort of Californiized by this point in time. So one last time before we left California, we went to a clothes optional beach near La Jolla and experienced one last time that giddy feeling of being stark naked in the great outdoors. It's a shame we can't do that anymore, but it's really not appropriate. Age appropriate, I guess. But just crossing the border at Nogales, I mean, we had a nice apartment in San Francisco. We had a corduroy couch with down cushions and a nice view out of the window. And then we crossed the border, and we snuck Ralph into a hotel room, and we crossed the border, and it was really a difference. There was a big difference between where we had been and where we were going. It was a new moon, so it was very dark. We were there on a railroad track with people cooking cabrito, and waiters were clamoring around us trying to sell us drinks, and there was loud music blasting from one cantina, and we were kind of scared. You know, we're sitting there going, "What are we doing, man? We could have gone skiing in Lake Tahoe, or eaten out every now and then, or done something a little more comfortable than this." And so, after a pretty restless night, we made that first border crossing, and fortunately, it went pretty smoothly. And our car was packed with every kind of tool we could possibly fit in there: table saw, 2 bicycles, all our clothes, and screws, and winches, and boat parts, everything we could fit in there. And we made a little perch for our dog so he could. Ralph needed to see out of the window. He throughout the thousands of miles that we drove down there, he never slept once. He was always vigilant, watching where we were going. And through Tequila, Mexico, which was, we drove through there at night, which was not what we should have done. But each border crossing was a challenge because we had so much crap in the car. And they all suspected we were trying to smuggle this in and sell it because taxes are so high in the Central American countries. But one of the great reliefs when we did get to Costa Rica was the factory. It really didn't dawn on us in San Francisco that it could have been a whole scam. It could have been who knows what it could have been. But the factory was legit. Johnny Schofield was the owner, and he was married to Tika, who was a wealthy Costa Rican. And they came up with this scheme to import automobiles was incredibly expensive. The taxes are so high on them. Costa Rica had to balance a budget. They couldn't run a deficit. They were just too small a country. So they came up with a scheme that if they imported parts for the Land Rover and assembled the cars there in the factory, that the government would not charge them anywhere near as much in taxes. So they became very wealthy doing this, and Costa Rica was overrun with Land Rovers. And he also happened to be a boat fanatic, and so he started Fibrotecnica, and that is where the sailboat was being built. When we arrived, they were building the plug, and the hull of our boat was fiberglass, and we were going to buy the fiberglass hull and take it to a place outside of San Jose and build the rest of the boat. But to build a fiberglass boat, you have to build a plug, which is an exact replica of the boat, and then you make a mold on top of that. It's sort of as though if you want to make a bowl, you make the bowl and then put the fiberglass on top of it, and that makes the mold, and then you can take it apart and put fiberglass, and it comes out smooth on the outside. So that was a great relief. And we were given complete access to the factory, which was a lot of fun because we got to watch the progress, which was slow. And we originally thought we could do this in 4 to 6 months, and we launched 2.5 years later. But the just being there while all this was going on was pretty special. And finally, the hull was finished, and we had rented a place outside of San Jose in Santana that had about an acre, and it had this plywood shack for a house. And so there we were there at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the driver to come to get in the truck and truck the hull out. And the gates open to the factory, and this guy comes in and turns the corner and goes into a 4-wheel skid, and I knew that had to be the driver, and it was. So we have some good pictures. And by the way, the book has about 50 pictures in it, which helps explain what we did. And so we got the boat out there. Unloading it was difficult. Everything turned out to be difficult, but that was part of the fun of it. Getting scared is sort of part of getting something done. I mean, if you're not a little scared, then you might be bored. So once we got it unloaded, I said in the journal, I don't know whether we'll ever get this out of here or not, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And the next period of time was a really blissful time, because we'd get up early in the morning and work on the boat. We had 6 months to prepare, so we had bought the teak, and we'd made as much preparation as we could. We built a shed over the hull. It looked like a Shanghai shed, but thank goodness our boat was going to look better than that. And we worked really every day, and at night we'd walk down the hill and get 5 beers, 3 for me and 2 for Helen. And there are different cultural things. We'd pass people on the street, and they'd go, Dios, Dios. Going, what is this? I mean, Dios is God. And we're walking down the street, and they're going, God, God. Well, it was adios. It was goodbye. In Costa Rica, people don't say hello, they say goodbye, which makes kind of sense. So, and one of the things that really made this a special time was how we became integrated into the Costa Rican society. We shopped at their grocery stores. We cooked at our place. We went to their hardware stores, and we got to the point where people didn't even look at us like we were gringos anymore. Our clothes were starting to sort of look like theirs, but the boat was starting to look pretty darn good, and the people at the factory came out and saw that this aft cockpit version of their hull made a lot more sense than the midship cockpit did. And they also saw that we were doing a pretty good job. And so when the shipwright, who actually knew what he was doing, succumbed to wine and women and guaro, which is a sugarcane-based liquor, which is brutal. But I know. I know. And he was showing up at work drunk, and good guy. It was really a shame that it turned out that way. He helped us a lot because we needed all the help we could get. But they told him he was through there at the factory. And lo and behold, I found out that they wanted to hire me at the factory, because I was the only gringo in Costa Rica who knew anything about sailboats. And I mean, okay, here we go. And so they came out, and we negotiated a contract, and the final outcome was that I had to be at work at 12:30 in the afternoon. They gave me a red Land Rover, which was great. And then I was finished with work at 4:30 in the afternoon. That way I could work on our boat in the morning and then at the factory there in the afternoons. And so here I am all of a sudden in a factory with 70 workers underneath me. I'm the only gringo. And we had a good time because we joked with each other. We were just trying to build boats. And so they had a sort of a cafeteria there where you could get a nice lunch for 75 cents. And they were really, and all of a sudden that helped us out a ton because we were starting to go through the money that we'd saved and inherited. And that started sort of a new period in our building, because all of a sudden the social pressures were quite a bit greater. People were coming out to visit us. They wanted to see the boat. We were going out with different people. A lot of the people from the States who were involved in the factory were coming, and we were supposed to sort of entertain them. That put a lot of stress on us. But we got through that, and finally it became time to, and one of the things that put a lot of pressure on us was the time frame. We did have just a time frame that we had to leave, or we would be charged taxes for this hull and for the engine and so on and so forth. So we had deadlines. But one of the things a lot of people asked us was, why didn't you hire people to help you? And it probably would have been logical to do that, but I didn't want to spend my time telling other people what to do, and instead we decided we'd just do it ourselves, which is what we did. And we had no help at all until Helen ran a saber saw up her finger, and that was traumatic. And so we had to go to the hospital, and yeah, they stitched it up once, and the doctor said, she cut it and he stitched it up, and he said, do you like the puntadas? And Helen didn't know Spanish that well, and she thought he meant the point on the end of the finger. And she went, no, quiero rondo. So the doctor sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, okay, and he clipped off the end of the finger and sewed it up again. And so she came out a little wobbly and pale. But the result of that was that we hired a maid, and that was good. We had someone to clean the house and do the laundry, and that took a lot of stress off of us. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, without having read the book, the leap from going from San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
to getting in your car,
Right.
because you heard that someone is building boats down in Costa Rica, and you thought that you could do it too. Build the bridge for me as to why you thought you could build a boat. Is that were you involved?
It was
were you
not
involved in
logical.
engineering, or have you ever done anything like that? in
No.
the past?
No.
You
How
just-
about carpentry? Because
Were you a
that
carpenter?
cockpit,
No.
that cockpit was gorgeous.
So you just figured you could build a boat? I mean,
Yeah.
So, all right.
Um,
So you went down there with the idea that they would help you build this boat. They would.
the original thought was that we would have somebody build it for us, and I would just supervise. But the more and more we got into it, the more we realized that if it was going to get done, we were going to have to
You
do
had to
it.
have a certain kind of expertise for them to then want to hire you to supervise others.
Well, I'd learned that expertise.
I think you're being a little humble about your ability to be able to do this.
Well, you know, I don't know. Some people just have propensities to do things. I've always enjoyed solving problems. I did have make little boxes out of a saw at home when I was, 10 years old and stuff like that. And always a fascination with building things. But no, it was a pretty big leap of faith. It wasn't too sharp, to be honest with you.
And the other bridge, which I'm not clear about, is, so were you in Dallas or Houston doing law school? Is that where you went?
I graduated from law school in Dallas.
And then you didn't practice really when you went
No.
to San Francisco. You took the bar, but then you didn't practice.
Right.
Good move.
Well, that may have been a lot of it too.
Trying any lawyers.
Trying to avoid work may have had a lot to do with our decision to go down.
So the years we're talking late 70s, early
1974 is when we drove
80s, when
down.
you drove down to
Yes, in an old Pontiac Executive. Which
And so you were there from 74 until.
we launched the boat in late '78, and that once we finally got it out of the yard, we took it to the factory and did as much work as we possibly could on it there. Again, we were faced with this timeline that we had to get the boat out of the country. And so about 5 days before that was up, we trucked the boat down to Punta Arenas on the Pacific side and launched it. And it was really a rather unremarkable launch in that there were no banners and there was really no one there that we knew other than a couple factory workers. And so we got it in the water and didn't sink. We jumped on it really quickly to see if there was any water coming in anywhere, and it wasn't. And we got the engine started. It worked. And so we were going around the corner there, and all of a sudden we'd come from 75-degree weather to 90-degree weather, and here we are sort of pale. We looked like we'd come from New York City to the beach. But then all of a sudden the smoke starts pouring out of the exhaust was made out of galvanated pipe. And the guy at the hardware store said, "You got to put Permatex in all these joints," which I should have done if it were for water, but it was for hot exhaust, and it was burning, and so we had all this smoke, and it left a fragrance in the boat for a couple of days. But everything worked. And so after 2 days, we hid out in the islands there we'd stepped the mast, and we hadn't unfolded the sails or anything yet. And about 3 weeks after that, we had to make our first sail because we had to get our passport stamped. And so it was a sail to Panama for a stamp. And so Helen and I took off across to the Bay of Nicoya and anchored off. And throughout the journal it says holding well with our anchors, and that was really sort of a nervous way of saying we don't know how to anchor very well. We had anchorages marked along the way where we should stop, and the first one we stopped, we just did not feel comfortable at all. And so we knew we were going to have to go on to the next one and sail all night, which was the first time we had done this. And so we were sailing by the compass for the first time, and a squall came through and just knocked us down one way. And it was blowing so ridiculously, one of the lines got wrapped around a stanchion and tied into a knot, and then it blew us the other way. And so I'm crawling up on the deck and trying to get the sails down and all this business. And after we got it all straightened out, we just were sort of looking at each other going, what have we done now? But we got there and got back. One of the funnier things that happened there too was we were coming back, and all of a sudden this pod of about 100 whales started swimming towards us. And we'd read all these stories about how sails had upended boats, and I knew we were going to be eaten, and Ralph was going to be devoured. And we'd also heard that if you beat the hull with pots and pans, perhaps that would... And of course we were worried about humpback whales that sometimes thought boats were other whales and wanted to mate with them. And so that was scary to think of a whale wanting to mate with our boat. But Helen went down and closed all the ports and took the dog down, and I'm up there. And thankfully we realized that these were just small whales, and pilot whales. And they were marked with white and black, and realized that they were just almost like porpoises. So we all got back up on deck, and we could have reached over and petted them. But then again, all in unison, they just decided to leave, and so we we got back, but to this little place called Joe Hills, which was about 10 miles from Punta Arenas. And the factory came down once we got back and propositioned me to help them convert their Tiburon 36 into a Cabo Rico 38. And it was a very good deal for us because, again, we were broke, dead broke. And so the deal was I would go up on Tuesdays on the bus and come back on Fridays and make this conversion, help make this conversion, which was one of the things. My first bit of advice when they hired me at the factory was you really need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. And fortunately they did. And so he and I got along very, very well right from the beginning, and so we we redesigned this boat together. And it turned out to be the Cabo Rico 38, which is a very well-respected production boat. They made about 200 of them.
That factory did?
Yes. And they maintain their value very well. And
is the factory still there?
the factory was still there until about 7 years ago. And it came apart due to some unfortunate personal problems of the people who owned it, not the factory itself. But it had a good run. And as I said, the Cabo Rico 38 is still a very well...
Did you have a patent on that, or did you have a...
No, it was... We were flying by the seat of our pants. We didn't know what we were doing. But so we were there for a year, helped make this conversion, and so it was time to leave. It was time to sail into the sunset and eat fresh fish. And so we sailed down south and went through the Panama Canal, which was a wonderful experience. And this was about the time that the Panama Canal was being turned over to Panama, which was very controversial in the States. And we sailed south to the San Blas Islands, and the Kuna Indians, who make the very colorful molas, inhabit the islands. There's supposed to be 365. And while we were there, our dinghy got loose and floated off. And so, I mean, we had to take our dog in and out. I mean, Ralph didn't really care for sailing that much, and he was very persistent in making sure that we took him to the shore at least twice a day. And so we went searching for the dinghy, and we finally found it on a little island that wasn't even on the charts. And I'd never been to a society that was a functional society where the women went without their tops on. It was the old Kuna way. And so I said, well, we need to get our dinghy back. And they said, well, you can have it back for $20. And I said, well, and we went to the hut to make these grand negotiations. And I said, if I'd found your ulu, which is what they called a dinghy, I would just give it back to you. And they said, well, but we didn't lose our ulu. You lost your ulu. So we paid the $20 and got the dinghy back. Then we sailed north to Providencia. And one of the things that was fascinating was that these were the areas where the pirates worked. This is where Captain Morgan and all these pirates raided. I mean, they raided Portobello. We stopped in Portobello. And there was nothing there really other than ruins from Captain Morgan's raid on Portobello. And he later on raided Panama. And Providencia is where he left from to make the sail down there to sack these different countries. We sailed from Providencia to Swan Island, and then from Swan Island we went to Roatan, Honduras, where we stayed for a year. And we went to Roatan. We entered Roatan with $400, and we left with $400, which we thought was pretty good. We carried our tools with us, so I worked on other sailboats and worked for a company down there called Caribbean Sailing Yachts, which was a charter outfit. But that's when I started singing. So every Thursday and Saturday night, I was a big star in Roatan. In fact, I was such a big star that the ice house wouldn't even charge me for ice. We got it all for free, as much as we wanted. And so we were there for a full year. During that time, we sailed to Guatemala, up the Rio Dulce. We sailed to Belize. And then we sailed back to Roatan. But things weren't quite the same. The small place, Romeo's, where I'd been playing the guitar, he was building a new place. It had been so successful. It was bigger, and we decided it was time to come back to the States. And so we sailed north to Mexico. But we'd become pretty good sailors by this time. I knew how to use a sextant, and that's all we could use. There wasn't a GPS. There was no other way to navigate. So it was the old Magellan thing. And it was hard. I mean, that was hard. It took me a long time to figure out how to use that. But just out of Mexico, the transmission crapped out. And but it didn't bother us. We'd been on the water. We'd sailed a lot. We'd taught ourselves how to dock, how to anchor, how to do everything under sail. And we had our navigation down. We were all of a sudden tan. Our boat was, the patina on all the bronze was that nice green. And Ralph was even kind of getting into the swing of things. And so, but we sailed into Key West, Florida. And there was an anchorage there with about 7 boats, and we sailed up and to find the place where we wanted to drop the anchor. And then we sailed out again, and the people realized we didn't have an engine, and they were really nervous about that, but they didn't need to worry. And so we sailed back up, dropped the anchor, and Ralph and I rode in and called customs, and they were nice enough to clear customs over the phone, and I felt that it was best that I didn't tell them that we'd built. I only told one white lie. I said the last place we'd been in the States was New Orleans, which we had been. We'd gone back to the States once on the airplane. I just felt it was better that I didn't tell them about the fact that we'd built the sailboat, and it would have complicated everything. But the coming back, sailing at night, and it was just Ralph and I, and I became really apprehensive again for exactly the opposite reasons that I had become apprehensive leaving the States. All of a sudden, we were used to singing all over, in bars, used to eating in cheap restaurants. We were used to the smell of the central markets. We knew how to function, really, and we loved it. And here, all of a sudden, we're coming into a place where you don't have to carry your own plastic egg carton, and where you don't have to carry your tote goat to carry the groceries in. We're going to a place where everybody wore shoes, where there was color TV, and there were plastic bags at the grocery stores, and McDonald's. And so the reverse of what we'd experienced beginning this thing reoccurred as we went in. But Key West has been very nice to us. I started playing 2 days later on the guitar, and I'm going to play a couple more songs for you. This first one is a song about it's sort of a nostalgic song. Both of these songs are nostalgic songs. And by the way, if anyone would like to buy a book, this CD comes along with it on me. It's my latest album, which is, as I said, sort of a nostalgic look at Key West. 5-digit phone numbers and dogs without leashes, bars without TVs, silver airplanes in the clear blue sky, DC-3 single engine per side, on air sunshine, on air sometime. Boats to build, there was seas to sail, songs to write, there was music to play. When there were 5-digit phone numbers and dogs without leashes, bars without TVs, silver airplanes in the clear blue sky, DC-3 single engine per side, on air sunshine, on air sometime. Books to write, there was work to do, places to go and come home to, where there were 5-digit phone numbers and dogs without leashes, bars without TVs, silver airplanes in the clear blue sky, DC-3 single engine per side, on air sunshine, on air sometime. Thank you. Air Sunshine flew out of Key West in the 1970s, and it was called Air Sometimes, and it was for a good reason. The last song I want to do for you is about Betty Page, and there's a book over there about Betty Page. She not only did some of her best well, her Bunny Yeager took some of her best photographs here in South Florida. But she also lived in Key West for 2 years and was married to Almond Walterson. And Paulie Walterson is a drummer and a friend of mine. And so I know someone who was related to someone who slept with Betty Page, which I... Betty Page, she was my wife when I was coming of age. Burlesque pin-up, she took off her clothes. For Camera Club, she was ready to pose with that girl next door smile. She was wearing nothing but a smile. And Santa's hat, decorating the tree. Playmate of the month, she winked right back at me. She loved the camera and it loved her too. She took it all, breaking all of the rules. Nature's child, she was free as the breeze. Out on the beach, she was Adam's Eve. God gave her that body, he must have loved her too. She starred in Teaserama, filmed in Hollywood, Nashville, New York, Miami Beach. Sexy posters in men's magazines. In '57, she moved to Key West, married Almond Walterson in a homemade wedding dress. They danced and drank at night, she loved to fish. It worked out for a while, and it was sad when she left. But being Betty Page was not an easy thing to do. Knockout pretty, she was too good to be true. Men would look at her in lustful, wicked ways. Hard on her husband, she was always on display. Betty Page, she was my wife when I was coming of age. Burlesque pin-up, she took off her clothes. Tarzan chain in a pussycat pose. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mitch, and the whole crew at Books and Books. You guys have been very fantastic. Wow.
Let's take some questions.
Yes, if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free.
If you knew then what you know now, would you do it again?
You betcha. No, it changed our lives. It did. I built the guitar. Yeah. I started looking at new guitars. I wanted something kind of fancy. I had Dolly Parton in mind with that, so I thought I'd build one with maple sides and all. And I started looking at the prices, and I went, I can just build one. But we built the boat, but the boat built us in a way too. And so we have a gallery in Key West, Harrison Gallery. Helen is the driving force behind the gallery, and it's her sculptures that really make the gallery feasible. And all of the skills that she learned came from the carpentry on the boat. And we still keep a lot of tools out back and do a lot of work. And so it gave us a completely different perspective on our lives, and it also, the way we integrated into the society of Costa Rica. Helen, we have an old film of some of this stuff that we took on Super 8. And Helen is walking around the factory, and we did work there. She did work there, varnish work and stuff like that. And the workers, she's just one of them. It was just, you rarely get to stay someplace long enough where you're not a tourist, where you're not just passing through.
Harrison Gallery rings a bell. Where are you two located?
Key West, Florida.
I know, but where exactly?
On White Street, 827 White. Okay. It's just down the street from the Studios Key West, between the Studios Key West and Dion's Chicken on Olivia Street. Yes?
Ben, I know you hadn't planned we talked about this, but Short on Underwear song, I think people here would really, would you play that?
Boy, you've caught me, and I don't know that I could remember all the words to it.
My life.
If people ask me, how did you sail away? How'd you convince your wife?
Yeah.
Do you like living on the boat? Or the kid and dog both yours? Is that varnish on the woodwork? Do you give guided tours? These are but a few of the questions I've been asked. No, yeah, I'd blow that, and we're on stream. So,
How did the in-laws finally react to you doing this?
well, of course, they thought we were just dumb as doors to do this. And when we called them on the phone, you know, Mom, Dad, we're going to go down to Costa Rica and build a sailboat. And but they sure came and visited us, and and they sure sailed around with us once we got it going.
Did you not know how to sail before you went there?
You know, in Corpus Christi, we'd done some day sailing. And that was one of the, you know, people had asked us when we were on our way out. They said, well, have you ever built a boat before? Well, technically, no. But we've been studying all the how-to books really hard. And do you know how to sail? Well, technically, yes, on day sailors. We, you know, understood the concept. Do you know Spanish? Well, mine was okay, but Helen was going to have to learn along the way, and she did a lot more quickly after the puntadas. So, no, it was not a terribly rational thing to do, but, you know, Helen and I, once we finally got together, and we've been together for 42 years now, we had this sense that we really wanted to do something special and make our lives something special, and it emboldened us.
So once you've done an adventure like that, how do you stay landlocked?
You have to live the life. And after that, I lived the life of a guitar player. I was a professional performer for 16 years on Duval Street. And that was something that I enjoyed very much doing. There's a thrill in performing, and the high you get from entertaining people and having people clap at your songs and drink tequila and stuff like that.
So you were there with the rise of Jimmy Buffett and all that stuff.
He was just getting started when we were down there. He was just getting famous when we arrived. And I owe him a lot, because in all these anchorages where we stopped and all the places where we stopped, there was nothing to do down in Central America at the time. There was no television. The radios, if you could get reception, was all in Spanish. And so you either read paperbacks that you passed around, or you had to listen to singers like me. And I got away with a lot by singing some of his early songs, like A Pirate's Look at 40, and Down to the Banana Republics, which is a Steve Goodman song. And My Head Hurts, My Feet Stink, and I Don't Love Jesus, and some of his rowdier songs. But I was kind of a Kansas City star at those places. And people bought us quite a few beers.
I presume you never did practice any form of law, though.
I finally had to in Key West, I'll confess. We had our first child lived on the boat for 5 years. And then when we had our second child, 9 years later, we realized we could not keep the boat and keep the gallery and keep the house going. We just simply could not afford it. And so that's when I was performing and earning a living as a guitar player. Then when the first one was accepted to college, and I found my back against the wall, the music wasn't what it had been for a while and for a long time. And we just weren't making enough money. And so I took the bar examination in Florida after not touching it for something like 28, 30 years. And yeah, so 80 days and 80 nights later, I did manage to pass the bar, which was, I think I was probably the lowest to make it, but they never asked that question. And I was after I passed it, I went to a friend of mine who was an attorney and says, "What do I do now?" And so eventually I ended up doing real property law for about 4 or 5 years before I and I still do a little bit. I do some probate and I do wills for people and things like that.
That leads to my question: is whatever happened to the boat?
The boat, we sold a boat.
All right.
And it has had sort of a tortured. I think that boat liked us a lot. I don't think it's sailed much since we sold it. Right now, it's up in Maryland, and I think it's rather derelict right now. And if anyone wants to buy it, I think you could probably get it for about $4,000. And the problem is that somebody stole everything off of it. And they stole the engine, they stole the stanchions, they stole the mast, they stole the sails, they stole everything. And so it would be about a $60,000 project to get it. But the hull's in great shape, and the below deck is totally intact, and the decks and that cabin topper. I mean, structurally it's sound. It just has none of the equipment that it needs to do its job. Well, listen, again, I want to thank you all very, very much for coming.
Thank you, Ben. All right, so a quick reminder for our internet audience watching at home.
Well,
so you
thank
can
you,
still
thank
call
you.
the number on the screen. Purchase a copy of the book. We'll
Where
have
did you
Ben sign
play?
it, and we'll ship it to wherever
You know,
you are
I
in
played
the
the
U.S. free
best
of
job I
charge.
had was at the Bull.
Also, a reminder that all of
Yeah, I
our
played there for
live
9
stream events are archived, so if you don't get to watch them live, you can visit the Books and Books website, go to the live streaming link, and they'll all be archived there for you to watch at your convenience. For those of you here in the house, we have the book for sale at the counter over there. Ben's going to be signing over there at the table to the left of the screen, and this has been such a charming presentation. Why don't we give Ben a big hand? Thanks very much.